Chapter V12 Character Summary 2.
Quattro Phobia Ghost War Battleship, years old. Quattro was very active in recent events, voyaging to the Demon King's continent and taking part in the battle there. He is the Ship of Despair, loaded with cannon-type and cannonball-type Demon King familiars. He is capable of sailing through the skies and traveling underwater, and also adept at aerial battles. Like Sam, he also manipulates space to expand its interior space and carry large quantities of cargo and personnel. The convenience he provides has solidified his position as a major method of transport used by Vandalu, but it is impossible for him to be his familiar, so he has been removed from the list of candidates to be brought to Orbom Central. He is currently making trips back and forth across the Boundary Mountain Range in order to train himself so that he can be used to smuggle goods into the Alcram Duchy and carry supplies into the former Silla territory. As a result, an ominous screeching that sounds like the creaking of trees echoes across the former Silla territory every night, striking terror into the hearts of the Sauron Duchy's soldiers who are tasked with keeping an eye on it. He is also one of the spikes on the shield that Takkard Alcram and his advisors perceive to be at their backs.
Nachan Bone Pandemonium Gigant Gigas, years old. Nachan was very active in recent events, being carried inside one of the fake Quattros, splitting into multiple bone swarms that acted independently, and creating bone vortexes that stripped the bones from the demigods defending Botin while they were still alive. As a result of recent battles, he has absorbed many bones belonging to colossi and elder dragons, becoming even more powerful, the most powerful undead in all of Lambda. Using the colossi bones, he combined with Legion and displayed a new form, an enormous colossus made of flesh and bone. Incidentally, some of Nachan's bones that are separated from him are among the troops of the undead army in the former Silla territory. While the majority of Nachan is on the Demon King's continent or the Demon Continent, these can't be controlled precisely, but they are still significant fighting forces, as they are still capable of charging at the enemy while spewing poisonous breath attacks. This is one of the sources of Rudel Sauron's headaches. They might look like ordinary skeletons at first glance, but they fly faster than birds and spread deadly poison onto the battlefield, and they can't be defeated by attacks from even veteran mercenaries and elite knights. Such enemies are a nightmare for Duke Sauron's army.
Kanako Tsuchiya Chaos Elf, 3 years old, 15 years old in appearance, female. The reincarnated individual who has acquired the artistic guider job after training numerous idols and gaining many fans through the concerts she held. This job represents the fact that she has become someone who has a large influence on the world, the kind of idol that high school girls on Earth dream of becoming. With that said, Kanako doesn't have a sense of any of that. The only thing she is aware of is that her attribute values are increasing at a faster rate. She still instructs the people who come to receive lessons from her and continues to sing and dance on stage, as if nothing has changed. However, it is typical of those with guider-type jobs to not feel its influence very strongly, as the influence is greater on those around them who are guided. She has guided Adiria, the potential hero chosen by the god of strings Hersham, and Carlos, the potential hero chosen by the god of heat hazes Rubicante. Kanako's guidance is connected to Vandalu's. It has the effect of causing those under its effect to be more easily guided by Vandalu as well. If they were to go on a world tour and perform in concerts all over Lambda, souls would be removed from Rodcourt's circle of transmigration system, one after another. Rodcourt's objective was to erase Vandalu because of his ability to devour souls, but Kanako is quite the threat to him as well.
Miriam, human, 16 years old, female. A human girl who is, or rather, was, a perfectly ordinary rookie adventurer. Now, she suddenly finds herself acting as the leader of the Heart Warrior Brigade, and even the nobles know her name. Indeed, she is no rookie, and her abilities are even beginning to surpass those of veteran adventurers. However, she is not aware of her own strength due to how incredible her transformation equipment and the people around her are. During the battle against the forces defending Botan, she was giving orders to not only her party, but to Simon and Natania as well, and this served as an opportunity to improve her leadership skills even further.
Botan, goddess of the earth and mother of craftsmanship, years old female. A great god who was sealed away by the demon king Gyujiranis during the war against the demon king's army. The moment the seal was removed, she found herself face to face with a grotesque-looking soul. And over the moments that followed, she learned of the shocking events that took place while she was sealed away. As a result of resisting being overwhelmed by these shocking events and gaining an understanding of the current situation, she chose to become an ally of Vandalu, a decision that is true to her own nature as a god. Xantark and Vita were worried about the love triangle between the three of them, but reconciliation took place after some face-punching and cheek-pinching. Personally, Botan harbors no ill feelings towards the actions of Bellwood and his followers when Bellwood was still a champion, but she is greatly discontented with the actions that had been taken after Bellwood became a god. It seems that she is willing to forgive the mistakes of a child mortal, but draws the line at the mistakes of an adult god. Regarding Vandalu's ability to break souls like Gyujirani's, she considers it to be yet another reason for her to support him and keep a cautious eye on him. Incidentally, the divine statues of her vary greatly in design, from those depicting her as having a curvy, motherly figure to those depicting her as a dark-skinned young woman holding a hammer and pliers. There are even statues that depict her as a dwarf woman. After her resurrection, she sent divine messages to the devoted people who prayed at these statues, and this is thought to have had a great effect in the Iron Nation of Marmuk, a vassal nation of the Amid Empire with a particularly large population of dwarves. Some revere her as a goddess of agriculture, perhaps associating this with the earth attribute, but like dairy farming, livestock farming, and fishing, agriculture is usually ruled over by Vita, as these occupations involve nurturing life and then gaining nourishment from it. They're not wrong, but they're not exactly right either, Botan thinks, feeling somewhat uncomfortable about this. But since people worshipping her this way are not mistaken, it seems that she's content to let them do as they please.
Pyria, goddess of water and knowledge, years old female. A great god who was defeated in the war against the demon king Gyujiranis and fell into a slumber after exhausting a vast amount of her power. She has actually been awake for the past several tens of thousands of years, but Vita had already been sealed away by Alda by the time she awakened, and she was hesitant to join Alda. Thus, she relied on Pargtarda to protect her while focusing on gathering information. As a result, she determined that she could not support the policies of Alda and his allies, so she feigned sleep and searched for an opportunity. As Vandalu grew stronger, she became certain that he was capable of getting past the gods serving Alda and undoing Botan's seal, and sent a divine message to Juliana. Many of Pyria's divine statues depict her as an intellectual woman wearing gowns or dresses that flow like water, and a significant number of them also depict her as an elf. Incidentally, the current situation in the world of Lambda is dire enough for Rodcourt to interfere, despite the fact that he normally doesn't interfere with the matters of other worlds. Things would be fine for another century or two, but in 1,000 years' time, it is highly likely that the expanding devil's nests will drastically reduce the area that humans can live in, to the point that their continued existence will become difficult to ensure. But this only affects Rodcourt and human societies, where the majority of the population worships the gods of Alda's faction. Places such as the region inside the Boundary Mountain Range and the Demon Continent, both of which are already covered in devil's nests, the devil's nests in which ghouls live, and the underground space of Gartland, will likely have people inhabiting them for thousands of years even without any change. Ironically, it is clear where the policies of the gods of Alda's forces will lead, and this only serves to demonstrate the effectiveness of Vita's plan to create races of people who are capable of surviving in devil's nests. And if Vandalu had not been reincarnated in this world, unless Alda's policies did a 180-degree turn, he and his subordinates would have been heavily weakened by the decline in humanity's population. In a few centuries after that,
humanity's extinction would have allowed Vida's faction to claim victory. But perhaps the nations within the Boundary Mountain Range would have been in a terrible state as well, due to the evil god of release Ravavifard and his servants. Pyria is the only one who foresaw this outcome, and that is one of the reasons she allied herself with Vandalue rather than Alda.
Jaredipus, evil god of sinful chains, years-old male. The evil god of sinful chains, one of the remnants of the Demon King's army who survived the war. He was not a significant god to begin with, but because the meaning of sin changed within him in the world of Lambda, his divine authority underwent a great change during the time he spent in hiding. He was unable to accept the champion Zakart's offer to join the champion's side, and yet he was fortunate enough to not be sealed away by the champion's army. However, because he did not have any ambition like Hihirushu Kaka and Zerzorjin to amass power while in hiding and then eventually rule the world, he chose to make contact with Vida's faction to become their ally. However, before he could do so, he was discovered by Belwood, who had become a heroic god. During the ensuing battle, he succeeded in containing Belwood, but was sealed away immediately afterwards by Alda, who came rushing to Belwood's aid. After that, he spent the next 50,000 years laughing at Alda, even as Alda continued to pound more and more stakes into his body, while conserving as much of his power as he could. Alda drove a countless number of stakes into him in an attempt to free Belwood, but the truth was that Belwood was never sealed away by Jaredipus's power. Belwood remained asleep of his own will, as he believed it was best for the world if he did nothing and thought about nothing. The stakes Alda drove into Jaredipus's body were all for naught. Hines managed to persuade Belwood to awaken, and Jaredipus summoned forth every last shred of the power that he had been conserving in an attempt to seal Belwood away along with himself. But he ended up being defeated by the attack of Hines, who was empowered by Belwood descending upon his body. Jaredipus's power is one that inflicts mental damage upon the target, by forcing them to experience their own sins from the perspective of their victims. No matter how tenacious the target's mind is, even if they do not even view their own actions as sins, even if their actions involved sacrificing a few for the greater good, it does not matter as they are forced to experience those actions from their victim's perspective. Only a general standard is used to define what is a sin, and if a victim of the action exists, then it is a sin even if the action is considered legal in the society the target lives in. This is because Jaredipus is a god who rules over sin, not a god who rules over law. By experiencing the hatred, resentment directed towards them and their own self-contradictions through their victims' eyes, even the most steely minds rust and crumble. This effect of Jaredipus's divine authority is so powerful that it destroyed the mind and will of Belwood, who had never considered anything other than himself or what was in front of him for tens of thousands of years. Jaredipus's divine authority has no effect when the minds of the target and their sins victims are overly different in structure. This is true when the target is a human and the victim is an insect, or when the target is an evil god and the victim is a human. In the end, Jaredipus was never able to make contact with the gods of Vida's faction, so to them, he is a being with many mysteries. Although they do not quite consider him a companion, many admire and respect him for his great achievement of sealing Belwood away. But they don't have any idea what kind of god he is. He has a skeptical, cynical personality, but that is because he is a god of sin through and through, and because he himself is an invader, in other words, a sinner in the eyes of this world. Jaredipus didn't use the last of his strength to try and escape or strike a blow at Alda in retaliation, instead choosing to remain bound to Belwood by chains. Perhaps this was his own way of atoning for his own sin. Incidentally, Alda's stakes of law consider Lambda a nation, and they target any being who is subject to the laws of the nation of Lambda. The armies led by the invader Gujarani's were not subject to Lambda's laws, but Jaredipus later became a god of Lambda after choosing to reside here. Thus, Alda's divine authority considered him as being subject to Lambda's laws. Gorn Boulder Colossus, years old male, one of the leaders of the demigods of Alda's forces. He was a colossus of equal standing to Bratio and Talos, and possessed a body that was as durable as a boulder. Alda put his trust in him and tasked him with the defense of Botin, putting him in command of dozens of demigods, and assigned the god of war horns Sirius and the god of war drums Zepon to support him. But no matter how important it was to amass powerful fighting forces, it was a mistake to assign Bratio and Madroza, who were of equal standing to Gorn, to the forces defending Botin. Because they were of equal standing to him, Gorn was not able to control them, even though they were both quick to become angry and act rashly. As a result, the force had disorganized leadership, and the battle went in the favor of Vandalyu and his companions. Their only hope at victory was to defeat Vandalyu and his allies while they were still unaware of the scope of the forces defending Botin. But after the initial battle, despite being a demigod who had never taken part in group battles other than during the war between Alda and Vida 100,000 years ago, he demonstrated a great deal of flexible thinking, coming up with plans such as making use of the monsters on the Demon King's continent to make up for the forces that were lost.
Bratio, the god of roaring thunder, years old male. A son of the colossus god Zerno. He resembled a supersized version of a macho bodybuilder. As one of the colossi who survived the war against the Demon King's army, his strength was roughly equal to that of Talos. He had a calm, caring, and tolerant personality, but this changed after he lost his wife in the war against the Demon King's army. After gaining an explosive temper with a short fuse, and having no enemy to exact his revenge on, he spent over 100,000 years guarding the seals on evil gods and preventing the expansion of devils' nests in lands far away from where humans live. Upon learning that there is a new demon king named Vandalyu, who has absorbed numerous fragments of the demon king Gujarani's, an unstoppable desire for vengeance exploded within him as he journeyed out to meet this new enemy. Vandalyu defeated him, devoured his soul, and turned his body into processed meat products. Bratio had a son with a similar personality and abilities, the lightning colossus Raidatel, who was also among the forces defending Botin.
Madroza, great ocean dragon god, years old female. A daughter of the dragon emperor god Marduk. She was an elder dragon with a long, serpent-like body, multiple pairs of wings, 2 pairs of legs, and a long tail. She was among the high-ranking elder dragons who survived the war against the Demon King. She was of roughly equal standing to Tiamat. Like Bratio, she views Vandalyu the same way she viewed the Demon King Gujarani's, and that was why she joined the forces defending Botin. One of her sons was the great vortex dragon god Zevald. After defeating her and devouring her soul, Vandalyu turned her body into a processed meat product. The product, which was renamed from Madroza bacon to Great Ocean bacon, is satisfying stomachs all over the demon empire of Vital.
Heinz human, years old male. Heinz has succeeded in defeating the recreation of Gujarani's and cleared Alda's dungeon of trials far more quickly than initially expected. Alda created this dungeon with the objective of making Heinz a vessel that Bellwood can descend upon within a short period of time. But Vandalyu destroyed Curatos, who had managed the dungeon, causing its difficulty to decrease significantly. With the destruction of Curatos, the god of records, the copies of enemies created in the trials were less faithful to the originals and lacked the high-level decision-making abilities that they would normally possess. They became no more than crude robots that simply repeated predetermined battle patterns. This made it possible for Heinz and his companions to clear the dungeon simply by dying repeatedly and analyzing the enemy's patterns. If the dungeon had remained at its original difficulty, they would have likely needed to spend at least another year inside it. However, because the difficulty of the trials was reduced, the strength of Heinz and his companions is also less than what it should have been when they conquered them. In terms of their status, they have changed jobs multiple times and increased their attribute values and the levels of their skills. However, their training strayed too far from real battles, where it is impossible to die and attempt the battle again, and enemies that are as strong as Heinz and his companions can make their own decisions to guide their movements. Alda believed that even despite this, once Bellwood was awakened, his power would allow Heinz to defeat Vandalue. However, having been convinced to awaken by Heinz, Bellwood has decided to leave all decisions to Heinz. If Heinz says, "Let's go right," then he will go right, and if Heinz said, "Never mind, let's go left," he will turn around and go left. If Heinz says, "Let's fight Vandalue," he will do so, and if Heinz says, "I've decided not to fight Vandalue," then he won't. In other words, he has decided to give up his own free will and become a mere power-up item for Heinz. This is a development that Heinz didn't expect. He thinks that Bellwood not enforcing his own will might be for the best, now that he has learned that Bellwood and all the gods of Alda's forces had been persecuting Vita's races because they're creepy. He was shocked that such an absurd reason was behind the past 100,000 years of persecution and conflict inflicted upon Vita's races, but he believes that because the reason is so absurd, the persecution and conflict can be stopped. It also depends on Alda's own reason for persecuting Vita's races, which Bellwood mentioned, but currently, Heinz is unable to leave the dungeon as he is suffering from the side effects of summoning Bellwood upon his body. His muscles have snapped apart in numerous places, and several dozen of his bones have suffered stress fractures. It was the avatar body generated for him by the dungeon that he had summoned Bellwood upon, the body that could be brought back to life after it died. But it seemed that he had been unable to endure the feedback this experience caused on his real body.
Bellwood heroic god, years-old male. The champion chosen by Alda, the god of law and fate. As the legends say, he led the champion's army into battle, and as the legends say, he defeated the demon king Gyujuranis. After that, he lived for over a century, with his youth preserved through Alda's powers. During the war between Alda and Vita, he defeated many of the important figures of Vita's faction, including the vampire ancestor and the undead Zakart. After his death, he became a heroic god, and Alda expected him to one day become Lambda's first new great god who would stand beside him shoulder to shoulder. On Earth, the world he originally came from, ever since he was a child, he was an honors student who was well known within his school due to his handsome appearance, exceptional grades, and talent in sports. He advocated for what was right, never failed to point out things that were wrong, and he was a natural leader. Without experiencing any setbacks up to that point, he became a university student. However, there is no guarantee that what is right is truly right, and what is wrong is truly wrong, and that is especially true when it comes to things regarding society. After experiencing his first setback in university, things never went well for him, and he spent his days in a gloomy mood. If he continued on this path, he would have likely been beaten down by the hardships of life and become one of the compromising adults that he detested so much, or become immersed in radical ideologies, or perhaps he would have been broken and chosen to live a quiet life in a quiet, inconspicuous corner of society. But instead, he was chosen as Alda's champion, granted tremendous power, and given the convenient stage of a world that was on the brink of destruction. He became a champion and then went on to becoming a god. Even when Zakart and the other creation-oriented champions were lost, even when rejecting Zakart's plans caused a dramatic increase in losses, even when the great gods were defeated one after another in battles in which he was in command, Bellwood never had any conscious awareness of his own sins. Even when only 3,000 people survived the war against the Demon King, even when Vita and her allies expressed their distrust of him, even when he later began his crusade to exterminate every single member of the races created by Vita, because they're creepy, and because one of their parents is an evil god, the thought that he could possibly be wrong never once crossed his mind. After he became a god, when his worshippers persecuted others for inventing things, burned Dhampirs and their parents alive at the stake, and attacked settlements of Vita's races, he told himself that they were doing the right thing and felt satisfied. Even when this resulted in war, even when his worshippers were divided into different factions that killed each other, even when many were killed, Bellwood told himself that these were sad events, but everyone was doing their best to do the right thing and felt satisfied. But Jaredipus's divine authority forced him to experience all of these things from the perspective of his victims, and forced him to realize for the first time that the races created by Vita are races of people.
After that, he closed his mind off within himself and fell into a slumber, believing that no matter what he did, things would always turn out worse, and even attempting to atone for what he had done would result in things becoming worse. Heinz persuaded him to awaken, but those thoughts have not changed. He has left everything to Heinz so that his own will can never influence the outcome of what happens in the future. As a champion, the way he fights is very troublesome. It is extremely simple in that he simply forces his way to victory with his overwhelming strength, so it has no weaknesses. Even underhanded tricks that would normally be a weakness for him are overcome through his sheer power. If one tricks him with an illusion, he uses his power as a champion to cut down the illusion and then the enemy. If he faces an enemy with an absolute, impenetrable defense, he focuses his immense power on a single point to pierce through that absolute defense. Even so, he was almost driven into a corner by Gyujiranis, but even Gyujiranis was unable to defeat Bellwood. Every time he did, Bellwood would shout, "It's not over yet," and get back up, or an ally would come and defend him. Gyujiranis must certainly have been very frustrated, having to fight against such an absurdly tenacious enemy. The guider job that Bellwood awakened to was guider. This is apparently a job worthy of an instigator, leading people for the sake of leading, when there is nothing at the destination. One may think that Heinz was manipulated by this job, but jobs do not become available unless one meets the conditions, and skills cannot be acquired without an appropriate reason. Bellwood's actions and character caused the guider job to become available to him, and his deeds caused him to acquire the guidance and enticement skills. Indeed, Bellwood's character did not change after acquiring the guider job from how it was previously. And even after he acquired it, if he had any desire to lead the people with a goal in mind, he could have done so. His guidance was a skill just like strength and attributes and mana enlargement, a part of who Bellwood was.
Edgar Human, years-old male. The five-colored blade scout and archer. His soul has had tiny fragments of the Demon King Gyujiranis' soul, hereafter referred to as Demon King powder, sprinkled over it by Rodcourt. The influence of the Demon King powder has strengthened him, greatly contributing to Heinz and his party's clearing of the trials in Alda's dungeon. However, Edgar's mind is gradually being taken over, and although his individual personality remains intact, a part of his mind consists of Gyujiranis' personality. His current state is similar to multiple personality disorder. However, Edgar's personality is constantly at the forefront, while Gyujiranis' remains hidden in the back of his mind. However, Gyujiranis' personality was on the verge of emerging due to the sheer hatred he felt upon seeing the fake copy of himself. The crudeness of the copy apparently crossed the limits of what he could tolerate. He had regarded Bellwood as a target of his vengeance, but now that Bellwood's mind has been shattered by Gyujiranis' own former subordinate and he has become nothing but a source of power for Heinz, Gyujiranis' personality has lost interest in him. He instead focuses his powerful feelings of hatred and fear towards Vandaliu, who has absorbed numerous fragments of his body and has the power to truly destroy him.
Selen Dhampir, 8 years old female. The Dhampir girl who is capable of driving Vandaliu's mind into a corner to the same extent as Heinz, or perhaps to an even greater extent. She is under the protection of Alda's peaceful faction and the worshippers of Vita who have friendly relations with them. Having learned of Vandaliu's existence and location after Darsha became an honorary countess, she wrote him a letter asking to be friends. Naturally, this ended in her receiving a cold response.
Goldie Mimic Human, years-old male. The mimic human who perished in the previous volume. However, because he was one of the 5 Knights of Alcrum, and because of the fake story created by Vandaliu and his collaborators, he is still spoken of as a hero in the Alcrum Duchy. He may be mentioned by name again in the future.
Forzigible, evil god of pillaging. Like Goldie, his name was somehow carved into Lambda's history. Despite falling victim to Zerzorgin, he is now known as the main villain behind the recent incident in the Alcrum Duchy. His existence is frequently forgotten about by those who masterminded the fake story that falsely accuses him of this.
Leonardo Human in his 40s male.
The beheading shadow, the fourth sword of the 15 evil-breaking swords that act as the Amid Empire's secret force, and currently the strongest of them all. He has crossed swords in fierce battles with Schneider numerous times in the past, but none of these battles resulted in either of them claiming victory. If he were an adventurer, he would certainly be considered S-class. He is far more capable than the five-headed snake Irvine was. He is the enemy that the storm of tyranny are most wary of. He has a simple yet dangerous personality, being easily satisfied with being able to cross swords with his enemy. However, he is a battle maniac rather than a homicidal one. Thus, he is someone who will never ally himself with Vita's faction. There are too many strong individuals in Vita's faction, and he would rather challenge them to battles to the death than stand shoulder to shoulder with them. He regards even the storm of tyranny this way, so those feelings would surely be stronger if he were to learn of Vandalu's existence. He does possess the common sense, reason, and sociability needed to serve as one of the nation's most capable individuals, but only as an covert agent. He is not in a position where he must ponder the future of the empire. It would be extremely dangerous for such individuals to think on their own and then act on those thoughts, so this is only natural. Besides, he is satisfied as long as he is able to fight as an individual. He has little love for the Amid Empire. If he were to consider the Orbalm Kingdom to be weak, and the worthy opponent Schneider were not present, he would likely turn against the Amid Empire just to have a powerful enemy to fight against.
Rikudo Hijiri Rikudo Hijiri, human, 35 years old, male. The traitor of the Bravers who wishes to get his hands on the death attribute at any cost, and currently the most dangerous person in Origin. His research into the death attribute has progressed to the point where he has succeeded in creating people similar to the members of the Eighth Guidance, but it has not yet achieved a perfect affinity for the death attribute. He plans to achieve this goal by acquiring and conducting research on Amamiya May, who likely has an affinity for the death attribute. However, May and Banda have put the metamorph, Shihuin Mari, whom he had been using as a body double, out of commission, and this has made it more difficult for him to allocate time to devote to research. He intends to reuse Metamorph as an experimental subject in order to make great progress on his research, but even if he acquires Death Attribute magic, Rikudu's mana is a fraction of Vandalu's. It is minuscule even when compared to the amount that he had possessed when he was the undead, approximately 100 million. Thanks to his cheat-like abilities, increased learning speed, and unlimited development, his mana pool is the largest of all humans in Origin, but he remains bound by the fact that he is a human. Even so, perhaps he has some kind of plan. He is certain that if he can become able to use Death Attribute magic, he will be able to defeat Amamiya Hiroto, the strongest of the Bravers. Incidentally, Rodcourt views the technology produced by Rikudu's research, the technology that allows the resuscitation of humans in a state of cardiopulmonary arrest or brain death, as a variation of cardiac massage and defibrillation, rather than as a technology that allows the resurrection of the dead. He remains wary of the technology, however. If it progresses to the point that it allows the revival of people whose corpses have begun to decompose, suffered heavy damage, or are missing altogether, it will be considered as resurrection of the dead and cause damage to his circle of transmigration system. In other words, Rodcourt is watching and waiting because his circle of transmigration system has yet to summer any damage.
Rankings: Zykup, Belmont, Eisen, Quinn, Princess Levia, Nagecup, Darsha, Teria, Bastia, Valkyrie Legions, Gina, Cornelia, Gizania, G-Cup, Sila, Isis Legion, Iris, Rapiacid, Nefcup, Eleanoras, Saria, Magissa, Kilinia, Jail, Rita, Feltonia Nu, Elikup, Paravale, Amuse, Xeris, Dediris Nu, Ereshkigal Legion, Orbia, D Cup, Keisha, Bilde,
Zaltsarit New,
Baldiria,
Juliana Rank Up,
Izanami Legend, Z Cup,
Kanako Tsuchiya,
Melissa J. Sayatome,
Privel,
Natania, Dorinza New, Povina Rank Ups, Minuma Hitomi Legions,
Aniwaka Rank Ups,
Zabi Cup,
Miriam Slight Rank Up, Vestra, Zandia,
Zadiris, Pluto Legions, Zagapi, Baba Yaga Legions, Gufidgarn Vessel, Zagapi,
Shade Legion,
Impossible to Measure Honorary Consultants, Yamada and Tiamat. Juliana has leapt all the way to D, and while Povina has been overtaken, she is catching back up. Miriam has developed a little, but not to the extent of changing cup sizes. The upper ranks are stable, but those in the lower ranks are showing striking development.
the development of Talishheim. Total population including the Demon Continent, approximately 73,000, approximately 23,000 in Talishheim, 50,000 on the Demon Continent.
Homunculi, golems and cursed weapons are not included in the population.
The migration of the Dark Elves in the western region of the continent has just begun.
Facilities in Talishheim. Mercury Mirror Golems. Explorers Guild Trading Post, Distribution Center, Job-Changing Room.
Church of Vita with statues of Vita's subordinate gods, the gods of her faction, Zeruworn, Ricklint, Xantark, and Farmon.
Public bathhouses. Carts of all kinds.
Publicly managed casino. Immortal Ent Forest has had Gant Ents planted, Skogsra and Leshy proliferating.
Golem factories of all kinds.
Monster plant fields.
Training dummy grounds, inhabited by undead heroes from Alda's faction.
Theater.
Artistic paintings that remain in the minds of those who view them. Entire paintings cannot be viewed except from the sky. The Root of Life. Group housing facilities for immigration applicants.
Dormitory for immigrants from human societies. Talishheim Castle.
Gehenna B Castle.
Enormous statue of Vandalu completed.
B-Class Dungeon X2, +1. C-Class Dungeon X2, D-Class Dungeon X3, E-Class Dungeon X1. Dungeon for cultivating pine trees for wine X1. Amusement Beach Dungeon.
Dungeon for fishing industry.
Dungeon to temporarily house demon army, attached to Vandalu's underground workshop.
Marshlands Lizardmen District.
Capricorn Farm.
Capricorn Milking Factory.
Explorers Guild Branch. Small shrine to Fitterg, the dragon god of 5 sins. Mental Encroachment Stone Circle. D-Class Dungeon X1, B-Class Dungeon X1.
Marshlands Scylla District.
Paddy Fields, demon ducks being used for farming.
Mud Bath Hot Springs.
Small shrine to Maribeville, the heroic goddess of the Scylla. Explorers Guild Branch.
Huge Capybara Farm. Duck Farm.
Mental Encroachment Stone Circle. Small dungeon for teleportation. Sauron Liberation Front Base, former Scylla territory. Mental Encroachment Stone Circle. Automatic undead creating magic circle, used to recycle intruders. D-Class Dungeon. Small dungeon for teleportation. Main station of the Dark Knight Knights Order. Crude quality undead army, including troops made of bones split off from Nachin. Demon continents.
Xantark's temporary divine realm.
City. Hot Springs. Enormous statue of Vandalu under construction. Dungeons X countless number.
Gartland New.
Images etched on the ground. Wall images. B-Class Dungeon X1. D-Class Dungeon X4. Demon King's Continent New. Dungeons X countless number. Portable facilities.
Nachin Concert Arena. Sam's Job-Changing Room. Quattro's Job-Changing Room. Nations within the boundary mountain, Range under the influence of Manas Venana. Nations personally visited by Vandalu.
Noble Orc Kingdom population, approximately 100,000.
Zanalpadna population, approximately 100,000.
Ghoul Nation population, approximately 5,000.
High Kobold Nation population, approximately 16,000. High Goblin Nation population, approximately 10,000.
Majin Nation population, approximately 100,000, of which approximately 1,000 are Majin. Kijin Nation population, approximately 10,000. Draconid Nation population, approximately 5,000. Centaur Nation population, approximately 15,000. Harpy Nation population, approximately 27,000. Lamia Nation population, approximately 20,000. Dark Elf Nation population, approximately 10,000.
Veda's Resting Grounds.
Merfolk Nation population, approximately 40,000. Unofficially allied nations.
Alcrim Duchy.